All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. This is really great. I know. I hope you all aren't like super desperate in like avoiding, the sun and like the beautiful weather and all that to hang out with me for an hour and talk about storytelling and all that. Yeah, let's just get into it. So, who can tell me who this guy is? All right, Michael Sam. Okay. What do you know about him? You kind of.
He's the first gay athlete to be drafted in the NFL.
Right. Do you know who he was drafted by?
The Rams.
The Rams. Okay. Do you know what position he plays?
Well, technically he was a DN, but the story is that his or have a place in the NFL.
Okay.
As a positional player.
Okay. Do you know how fast he runs the 40? Oh man, you know way too much about sports. You're ruining my anecdote. But everybody, he went in what, like the 7th round? Okay, so when was the last time anybody ever heard of a 7th round pick in the NFL who wasn't like super into sports? And the thing is, like, you're right, like Michael Sam, like he has this incredible story, right, as being the first openly gay man, a gay football player who's been drafted in the NFL, and he's been on the cover of magazines and all this stuff because there's a story attached to it. He's not just another defensive end, right? He's not just another big football player. He's got a real story to him, and that's really helped humanize him and sort of bring all this attention and made him one of the really interesting stories to watch during the draft. And that's because stories really matter. There was research done at Stanford University, and they found that stories are 22 times more memorable than facts alone. So, yeah, while everybody in America knows about Michael Sam and his story, very few people remember what his time was in the 40 or how many sacks he had for the University of Missouri last year. And stories are sort of the way we remember. They're how we sort of build identities. They're how we learn. So this is Isaac Newton up here, and I know nothing about his theories, but I do know that there was an apple, and the apple fell, and that's how we know about gravity, right? Because that story is something that sticks with all of us in our heads as we go through school. And stories are also how we connect. For years, a lot of nonprofit agencies and NGOs tried to raise money to help people in Africa and in impoverished parts all around the world, but they didn't have a whole lot of success. Until the 1980s, they realized sort of the power of story, and they started personalizing a lot of the pitches on TV. I don't know if any of you remember Sally Struthers, but that was one thing that she really focused on, to break through, connect, and bring people together around a shared sense of story. So story is something that I know a few things about. I've been a journalist for the last 12 years. I've worked in newspapers and TV stations and magazines, and have told hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of stories. And one of them I told while I was the executive producer at KVAL TV here in Eugene before I enrolled in my MBA. And there was this fact that I had heard, and the fact was that the state of Oregon has the highest rate of child hunger of any state in the nation. More than West Virginia, more than Louisiana. It was a startling fact. But I knew that if I was going to tell a story about that, the way I would connect with anybody who would be watching it would be to tell a story and to really show the details of how that experience is lived. So I interviewed this family. They lived up in Oak Ridge, the Benhams, and they told me a lot about their experiences going through hunger and struggling to feed their kids. And they talked about evenings where they would have ketchup soup because that was all they had around and that was all they could afford. And so that story I was able to put that out there on the news, and it really resonated with people much more than if you would just say the facts alone. So what's it to you? So why do you guys care? The thing is, a story is universal, and it is very important to the job search process. During my MBA, I have been a GTF in the Career Services Office, so I've been helping out students with cover letters and resumes, and those are using the same skills. It's all about telling a story and trying to make a connection with an employer in hopes that they'll hire you. Hey, everybody. So what's your story for being late? It's sunny. Everybody gets a pass. It's fine. So yeah, story is how you make that first connection, right, with an employer. They typically only spend 6 seconds looking through a resume, and that number is just, it's shrinking all the time because it's a tough job market out there. You have a whole lot of competition, a bunch of people applying for the same kinds of jobs, and so they're just, you know, kind of looking through these resumes and looking through these cover letters really, really fast. So you've got to find a way that gets their attention and draws them in. And interviews are tough. So even if you get past that cover letter stage and you get into an interview, I mean, I've had job interviews that have lasted the entire day. And so you have to bring a whole lot of stories with you, you know, to have something to talk about during a long, drawn-out interview. And you really want to tell stories strategically so you can connect and you can really show the employer that you're going to be great for the job. So that's what we're doing here today. We're trying to figure out what our stories are. And it wouldn't be an official workshop if I didn't have like some sort of catchy like framework to impart on you guys. So here's what I've come up with. It's 3 steps to a killer story, and that's what we're going to focus on today. So the first step to your killer story is to gel it, right? You've got to choose a story that serves your purpose. You've got to tell it, which means give your story a structure. And number 3, you've got to sell it. You've got to find a way to make your story memorable. You've got to find a way to have your story, you know, kind of jump off the page and be something that really resonates with the recruiter or the CEO or the hiring manager or whoever it is you're trying to connect with. So let's take a deeper look at step 1. So gel it. Pick a story that serves your purpose. So one thing I deal with a lot when I'm looking at cover letters as part of my graduate teaching fellowship is that students will talk a lot about themselves and how they've done all these cool things and, you know, I did this and that, and it's all really, really great. But the thing about telling your story, especially in a job search context, is that it isn't just about you. It's about your employer, and it's about their needs and the needs of your audience. So the first questions you have to ask, and whether this is, you know, you're doing a cover letter or you're going in for that job interview, is really think hard about, okay, what's the employer looking for? What are their priorities, and what kind of skills do they need? There's really no secret to this. It's usually all there on a job posting, or with a little bit of research, you can find out what the values the company has, maybe a little bit about the background of you know, some of the strategic initiatives that the company is embarking upon. Usually, though, they always kind of boil down to the 3 same things: communication, leadership, and problem solving. Those are sort of universally applicable no matter what job you're applying for. You know, it could be working as a barista at Starbucks, or you know, the CEO of a company, or you know, a job here at the university. A lot of times they boil down to these things, and you know, they're pretty broad categories. So I know all of us in this room have some experience doing each of those things. It's just a matter of finding a way to connect with those stories. So once you've figured out what it is that the employer needs, you got to do a self-assessment and think about, okay, how can I be useful, right? Like, what do I have to offer here? What am I really good at? What am I really proud of? And what impact have I made? And this isn't just limited to work experience. I know most of you are undergraduates in here and may not have a whole lot of, you know, professional work experience. Maybe you've got a couple part-time jobs and an internship and some volunteering, and that stuff is all great. Like, don't shy away from stuff you've done, whether it's volunteering for your church or school experience. Even folks in the MBA cohort who have a lot of work experience will focus on sort of student consulting projects that they've done during their time in the MBA is really great experience that allows them to tell the stories that are going to get them noticed. So let's try an example. Let's say you are applying for the most difficult job imaginable. So Hillary Clinton, right? Like, she hasn't said that she's going to run for president, but everybody kind of knows, right? That she's going to do it, and she's probably going to run against Jeb Bush, which would be crazy. But anyway, so let's run through this exercise with her. So she's got to consider the audience. So for Hillary Clinton running for president, who would you say her audience is? You had them? Voters. Yeah, definitely. Voters. So what are their needs? All right, anybody can kind of jump in here. Yeah, they're going to think they want her to do a good job, right? They want her to be a leader, probably, on some level. So she's got to think, okay, how can I be useful, right? How can I provide that sort of leadership, right? And so, what are her stories? So if you were thinking, like, okay, I'm Hillary Clinton, I'm applying for president, and you guys all kind of know a little bit about her background, like, what do you think are some things that she could talk about that would connect with her audience, voters, and sort of demonstrate leadership? Whether you're Republican or Democrat, it's totally, you could definitely do the same thing for anybody who's running.
Being Secretary of State.
Yeah, being Secretary of State. Right? And so how did that demonstrate leadership?
She was trusted by Barack Obama at that time to handle various international affairs and represent the U.S. To other world leaders.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and there were some like really tricky spots she found herself in the middle of, and she got through them. And so yeah, there is sort of the beginning of her story. And there are people who are going to get paid millions and millions of dollars to sort of figure out, okay, how do you tell that in a really strategic way? But we just kind of came up with the basics of it right here. So we're going to do a little exercise. So I'm not going to have you guys all run for president, but I want you to just take a minute or two and sort of just think in your head about a time that you've demonstrated leadership. And maybe it was in a job, maybe it was when you were a camp counselor, maybe it was when, your younger brother got arrested and you had to go, bail him out or something like that. But just take a few minutes, think about them, think about examples of leadership, and then share them with your neighbor. We've gelled our story. We've got to find a way to tell it. You got to give your story a structure. And there's a really convenient strategy here. Now, I didn't come up with this one, but that is a very American eagle right there. It's pretty awesome. What's that?
We're applying for president.
That's right, yeah. So this one is called SOAR. All right, and this is sort of a structure for actually telling your story. And the first thing is your situation. The O is for an obstacle. A is action. And your R is result. Okay? And so if you think about any story that's really ever been told, kind of boils down to these elements, whether it was like, the movie Star Wars totally follows this structure, or your cover letter, or, when you're telling a story to somebody about what your weekend was, you can definitely use this method. It's all pretty much the same. So I tried to do it with Harry Potter, and this is what I came up with. Situation, he's an orphan. O, obstacle, Voldemort wants him dead. Action, he got really good at magic. And R, he saved the wizard world from evil, right? So that's the SOAR method in action right there. So does anybody want to try with, this is Oprah Winfrey. Do you guys remember Oprah Winfrey? Raise your hand if you know who Oprah Winfrey is, right? Okay, all right. Situation? She got fired? Oh, yeah, she did. Okay, all right, so situation. So, situation is her employment is kind of coming to an end. So what's the obstacle she faced?
She was trying to reinvent herself at that time.
Okay, so maybe that's kind of the action that she took was sort of reinventing. The obstacle was like, no more, like I lost my paycheck, I was making millions, all right. So situation, the boss doesn't like her anymore. O, obstacle, she's going to run out of money if she loses her job. A, which you already mentioned, was she reinvents herself, and what was the result?
Pretty good programmer.
Yeah, she's pretty good. She's got her own network. It's called OWN, actually. So yeah, there's an example of SOAR in action. You could have told there's a whole bunch of different stories you could have done with her. Maybe I should have done Oprah Winfrey as the example, and then you guys could have done Harry Potter. Try to come up with that, but you do get your own shot at this. Okay, so I want you to pick one of the celebrities here and use SOAR to tell their story. So if you could just do this by yourself, and you know Jay-Z and Obama, and then I don't remember what her name was, but you remember that she's a famous surfer, and she had an encounter with a shark. So pick one of these, and then take a couple minutes and write down their story in using the SOAR format. The music didn't work, so we'll just have to deal with the silence. This looks like the Jay-Z table over here. Is that right?
I was actually doing Jay-Z.
Who'd you pick? Okay, perfect. It's like everyone's picking Jay-Z. What did you do?
I don't know the name either.
Yeah,
If you said it, I recognize it.
I want to say it's like Christy or something, but I knew it last time I gave this presentation, but I just have forgotten it since then. Bethany Hamilton, there you go. By a shark, but the framework definitely applies to you in your life, and whether you faced a personal obstacle or maybe the obstacle was within the company and there was, you guys didn't have enough money to do the project, but you found a creative way. All sorts of, the framework applies to all sorts of situations. So it's a really good one to keep in mind. So that's the SOAR method. And so that kind of wraps up telling the story. So we've figured out how to gel our story, right? Choose the story that we want to use, in our job search. Figured out how to tell it, how to give it a structure by using SOAR. And now we're going to sell it. So this is the final, part of this strategy right here. I would totally buy a car from this guy. It would just to say that I did. So for story selling, for selling the story, I've got basically 4 things I want you to keep in mind. And these, again, they work on your cover letter. They work in a job interview. They work when you're kind of schmoozing with a potential employer. And that's just to keep it short, keep it simple, be specific, and focus on impact. And those sound really, really easy and really intuitive. But as you'll see as we kind of go on through this portion, it can be difficult to just boil your story down to its essence. And one thing to keep in mind as you are sort of selling your story and you're really presenting this to an audience, you're not this guy, like you're not Ernest Hemingway, right? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be this like wonderful thing of prose, or it has to be like this totally amazing story. That's one surefire way to really psych yourself out. And I know because in my GTF, I'm doing cover letters all the time. I'm doing this workshop, and I'm trying to write a cover letter right now, and I'm totally trying to be like Ernest, like this is going to be the greatest thing ever, and it kind of slows you down, and it makes you feel it's just putting too much pressure on yourself. So remember, just try to stay in a sort of natural state when you're telling these stories, and use just kind of natural, simple language. So we have a few examples of things sort of not to do and things to do, and some of these are real life examples that I took from cover letters that I've seen. So somebody wrote, my job function allowed me to optimize interpersonal synergies in pursuit of efficiencies, right? Like we hear that like all the time in sort of the business world, but what does that mean? So here's a better way to say it. I work with people from diverse backgrounds and delivered results. It's following the 4 commandments. It's being specific, it's being yourself, and it's keeping it short and simple and all that good stuff. Here's another one. Thanks to my outreach on social media, the event was very successful, which is actually pretty good. But a better way is to say, thanks to my outreach on social media, the event raised $10,000, the most in company history. So what would you say is the difference between sort of the first version and the second version? Yeah.
The second one's measurable, like $2,000 to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hang on. Totally. Yeah. Shows the impact. It's really specific, and that's just really going to connect with you as somebody who's looking through a whole lot of job applications. One last one. I was tasked with implementing a new software program in the accounting department that streamlined the payroll process. Again, probably nothing really wrong with that, but a better way to say it might be, I implemented an innovative new accounting program that cut payroll processing time in half. So again, it's like that idea of showing an impact and really being specific about, okay, what did I really do that made a difference for that company or that fundraising project or that school project, whatever your story is focused on. So we've had our 3 steps to a killer story. Gel it, tell it, and sell it. Does anybody have any questions so far? Does this make sense? Does this sound crazy? Should we just go out in the front, in the quad and throw the frisbee around? All right, so if you guys all understand it, we're going to take a shot and see if we can do it ourselves. So like I mentioned, a lot of these jobs that we see are looking for people who are going to be leaders, problem solvers, great communicators. So I want you to think about imagine you're applying for a job, and one qualification they're looking for is somebody who's a proven leader. Okay? So I want you to take some time and think about what your SOAR story might be when you're applying for that job. So maybe go back and think that first exercise we did where you thought about a time where you demonstrated leadership. Maybe you can use that story. Maybe you've come up with a different one that you feel might work a little bit better in that framework. But take a few minutes, think about when you've been a proven leader, and use the SOAR framework to come up with your own story.
situation was that. So the situation was that I was doing well in accounting for 11, and all my friends weren't. So the obstacle was that they were trying to they were bad, they were trying to get better at it. So the action that I took was to host review sessions as a result of better grades. Is that good?
That totally works. You really did get a better grade?
I mean, I was doing good. They were doing good.
Yeah, it works. Did you go already? Okay. Okay. Yeah.
So would the situation be me doing well or them doing
classmates, reach a new level. So that's like, as an employer, I'm going to read that. Oh, wow. I would love to have somebody come in and help do that with some of my employees. So, yeah. All right. Great. You got it, man. Totally got it. All right. Did you guys all go? You guys all went? You guys done? Okay, so has everybody had a chance to do their source story? You guys done? Okay. Did you all three get a chance to go? Okay. All right, now I want you to find a new partner and somebody else you haven't talked to yet, and try to tell your story again, the same story source story that you just did, but try to do it in 30 seconds. Okay, so find a new partner and try to tell your same story again. Okay, yeah.
So, yeah, try to get some dialogue with people during this class. It's still recording.
Because this is
filming it.
okay.
You can still sync up all the sound.
Okay. Excuse me, I'm just gonna sneak through. Nicely done and very quick. So what was the situation again?
I was doing like a internship and we needed 500 signatures for this. So I said,
Okay. Oh, great job. So do you think, what do you think if you were an employer and you on a cover letter read a story like that, what would you think?
I guess I thought that it was good.
Yeah. Yeah, do you think that person might be valuable to your organization?
Yeah, definitely. I guess it was depending on how they said their action.
Right, yeah, because you can use them in different ways. Like you could tell that same story and tell it one way and make it about leadership, but maybe you could tell it a different way and make it about teamwork, or make it about, or maybe they're looking for fundraising and it's just like a straight up story about how I fundraise. Yeah, so yeah, exactly. All right, well, you got it. Nice job. How are you doing? Good. So is there a difference in telling it the first time and the second time?
No, but actually, because this first time I only take 30 seconds.
Okay, great. All right. Easier the second time? Okay. Right, right. Absolutely. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to go? Everyone? Okay. All right, you guys got way longer than 30 seconds, but I'm nice. All right, so you guys can have a seat. Well, all right. All right, so what did you guys think? What was that experience like? Was it You got better at it? So tell me a little more, like why do you feel it went better the second time?
Well, we had the time frame, and the second time it was more hit the key points instead of more fluff to it.
Right. So what do you think would be more realistic situation if you're doing a cover letter or you're in a job interview? Do you think you'd have more time or less time? Do you think you need to really get to the point?
In an interview, I think you'd have more time.
Yeah. That's true. It probably depends on how long you have in the interview. But like generally, I think, I don't know, think about it like this. Like we all have stories that we go to, like, I don't know, like I have stories I tell about my brother, right? That are really funny and really embarrassing for him. But I've told them so many times, like I'm so good at them. What? Oh, gosh. I have 30. Oh, boy. 30 seconds. So my brother was playing basketball, and he got hit in the face with an elbow, and he had to inform my mom, but instead of just gradually going up to her and saying, "Hi, Mom, I got hurt," he snuck up behind the car and popped his face into the window and goes like that, and his tooth was knocked out and there was blood everywhere. And my mom freaked out, and so I don't know if I'd ever tell that story in a job interview, but I certainly would tell that with relish after a couple beers. So. But the same goes for our stories that we're telling in cover letters and in job interviews. The principles are the same, right? So the more you can tell it, the more practice that you have, the better it's going to go. So sometimes people come into the office and they say, I've got a job interview today. How do I prepare? And I'm like, well, like that's happening now. Like what you should do is just call a friend and just talk to them and tell them about your experiences and maybe talk to them about some of your stories in a sort of comfortable setting, because it's like practice, and the more comfortable you get, the better your story's going to be. So does anybody else have any different view? Jordan?
I thought it was tougher the second time around because the people I told the story to the first time knew a bit more about my background, and so I didn't have to get as much context.
Yeah.
But then the second time also was an abbreviated time frame, which I think I exceeded. But I was struggling with that because I knew, I had to give all this background before I could even start the story. Last time. So I think in a job interview setting, it might be difficult. I think I would need to learn to get to the point faster, or really make the context part shorter so that I'm not boring the person with the whole story.
Yeah, that's a really great point. That's something I see a lot in sort of the consultations with students too. Is on cover letters sometimes, or on resumes, sometimes they'll have very technical programs that they've worked with, and they're applying for a job in the computer sector, and they've got these really technical skills, and it's like, well, who's your audience? Do they really know what you're talking about? And sometimes they do, but if you're trying to transition to a whole nother line of work, you're going to have to explain a lot more context about what some of these programs are and how it works. So that's something that, totally comes up a lot, and I think it gets back to the idea, really consider your audience, right? And who are you telling the story to, and what information is critical for them, to understand your situation. Does anybody want to tell their SOAR story? Anybody have a good one? No? You kind of raised your hand. You moved. Don't they tell you that? Never move when when somebody is just looking for, I'm just looking for someone to call on.
I told the story twice. summers ago, my friends and I were home for summer break, you know, and we all thought, hey, it would be really fun if we went camping in Corvallis to visit our friend who also lives in Corvallis. And so we needed to figure out what we wanted to do, how we were going to go camping, what to bring to go camping, so just all the logistics. So what I did was I created a Google document for planning communication of all the things that we need to do. So using that, we figured out what things we needed to bring, where we were going to stay, transportation, when we were all able to go Corvallis, and all that planning communication made for a very fun and enjoyable camp.
That's an excellent result. So can somebody like break it down? Like, so what was his sore? What did he just have there? What would you say the situation was? Wanted to go camping. Okay, obstacle.
Logistics to work out and different schedules.
And so what was the action that he took? The Google Doc. Masterful. And the result, everyone has a great time. See? It works for camping. It works for, you know, job situations. It works for your brother, all that good stuff. So that's pretty much all I have for you folks today, unless you have any questions or if there's anything else you want to talk about. Or yeah, Megan?
Can I ask you for a piece of advice?
Yeah.
Would you recommend having like a handful of stories to go into an interview hoping that you get to, or do you think you should just keep this in mind if something comes up?
I think you should totally go in with stories. And even if you don't use them, like you never know if the situation, like if the situation arises, like you want to have it. Like I don't know, like I did that like a few months ago. So I'm putting together this cover letter for a job. It's here on campus. And I had an informational interview with the person doing the hiring. And the job hadn't posted yet, but it was a few months in advance. And she was in a position that my grandfather had. Like my grandfather worked at a different university in like, you know, the 1940s. But he had the same sort of role. He was like the interim dean of a journalism school. And so I was like, man, you know what? Like that is not really relevant to anything, but I could totally tell that story and it just at least, I don't know, it would be a kind of shared, a sort of shared experience a little bit. Like, you know, like I kind of understand, she might understand me a little bit more and I might understand her a little better. So I totally thought of that and I had that in the back of my mind and we talked for a while and I didn't bring it up, but I wish that I had. So I think, yeah, going in with stories and if the situation presents itself, like totally use it. You know, I forgot to use it in that case, but I think if I would have, it would have been really effective and it would have made me more memorable. So yeah, I think any sort of advanced planning you could do is going to be helpful. And if anything, it also makes you more confident too. You know, we all have like these awkward silences. And in journalism, like journalists love awkward silences because then people will just start talking and like they might not even have anything to say, but they'll just start blathering. And so that's a way you can kind of catch somebody doing, you know, confessing to something they might otherwise might not. But if you have a story ready to go in that awkward moment, you know, you've got something to bring to the table. So it just might make you more confident in those situations. Do you have a hand up?
I also found that in an interview, if you prepared a few stories, that even if they don't ask you specifically, tell me about a time that you're a proven leader, you could ask something that's sort of related, or that like a slight modification to your story could apply to the question that they're asking.
Right.
And so just having already thought about your experiences and what the position requires, you can sort of start out with your story and tie it.
So I know you just went through a really successful job search. Did you end up using did you have stories prepared when you went in?
Yeah, I have about 4 or 5 stories. I used, I think, 3 or 4 of them. And it was the same thing where like I had gone through the job application and the job description and looked at what they were looking for. And so usually if they asked me to tell them about a time when something happened, I could tell kind of what they were poking around for and hoping to find out about me. And so I could pull in some of the buzzwords from the job description in telling my story.
Yeah, and so what was the result? So learn from Eric. That's a really wonderful case in point. All right, anything else? Or everyone wants to get back to the Frisbees? All right, so you guys are all free to go, but if you would, take one of these. It's just like a feedback form, and if you wouldn't mind just kind of filling it out, it'll take like 2 seconds. Actually, I can pass these around. Might be easier. Then you can go. And I hope whoops, I'm sorry. I don't know if there's enough for everybody. Random piles making their way around the room. Oh, and one other thing too is also know that Career Services is here for undergraduates. If you guys are business majors and ever want somebody to look over your specific cover letter or your resume or talk to you about interviewing, do a mock interview, whatever sort of career strategy, that all happens in Career Services, 240 Lillis, and there are drop-in hours right there where you can just sign up at the front desk and we'll take care of you. You can just toss them over on that when you head out. All right, so thank you, everybody. Yeah.